So when I hear young entrepreneurs say, my goal is to have over $1 million in the bank, it's like that just showcases their ignorance.
Just depends on how they're saying it. Hopefully it's in a trust, or hopefully it's in a corporation or some sort of an entity. But nothing as good as certain trusts. Nothing. That's real protection. That's real security.
So what you're talking about is putting your money, which is still your money, you can still control it, but it's out of your name completely. So when they look at a Rick Gutman or a Jared Carver on paper, there's nothing there for them to grab. And more importantly, is structuring it in a way where there's anonymity.
Well, the point is to own nothing. You want to be broke on paper. When I stepped into the direct selling industry, everything was like show. In front of this car and this house, and look what I have. And it was always odd for me because I had never participated in that, even though I was one of the top earners in the world. People can make money, but systems create wealth. You need strength, humility, and you need financial education. You don't need to show anything that you have. You need to go through the fire and learn everything the hard way. I can make as much money as I want, and it's only limited by...
Oh my gosh, Rick. You always blow my mind, dude.
Guys, I'm really excited about this podcast. Before we show you it, I have to give you a little bit of a background story on our guest, Rick Gutman. Rick has been one of my mentors and friends for the last 5 years. I don't say this much about people, but he's a man that I want to be like, not just from the standpoint of his business accolades, which speak for himself. Rick's been an 8-figure earner for multiple years, very successful in the diamond industry and extremely successful in the real estate industry. His success speaks for himself, but the man that he is the most unique part about him. A man of God, but also one of the most humble men that I've ever met, and just so much knowledge. So he is the author of Presence Before Position. This book goes into the full story of Rick's past, the ups and downs of his life. Unfortunately, him losing his mom at 18, him being tormented by demons when he was younger, from him going on to do the missionary work where he was casting out demons in Egypt, casting out demons in Indonesia, going to Honduras. So many part of the story that I'm leaving a cliffhanger on, because this podcast was a 5-hour podcast. We did not leave the seat for 5 hours. And so we're going to separate this into 3, maybe 4 parts. This first part you're going to see was the end of the podcast. This gets into his business. This gets into his mindset. This gets into him mixing God with business, which hasn't really been done by many people, which is what I love the most about it. So you'll hear us referencing things from the past. Again, I would recommend you guys go pick up his book. This will give you a lot more context on it. We will be releasing the other parts here pretty soon, but I really wanted to give you guys the business value in this. And that way you guys can kind of get the most from Rick and then be curious about his story from the past. But I want to tease you guys. There's going to be about 3 or 4 parts coming out, but I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let's get into it.
From the moment I was my first mission trip, I had already stepped into wealth. I was already doing big diamond deals and real estate deals, and I was living in Palm Desert, California, and buying land and subdividing land. And so when I would go on these 10-day mission trips to all of these different countries, I was already operating at both king and priest, but it was still, I was still learning the process of how to carry both, so the training ground wasn't before. The training ground was literally, I had to learn as I went.
Okay, so what's the phase? You had the tile company, but in the book we talk about the tile company, and then you had that mentor who was challenging you about like, will you actually commit? Who he's like, you teach me about God and I'll teach about there. Was that all prior to Egypt and Indonesia?
So that's a great question. It was right after my Honduras trip. I had only been back 2 days and I went to the wedding, and that's when my first mentor is the one that said, you teach me about Jesus and I'll teach you my business.
So tile company is before Honduras?
Tile company. Tile company. While I was in Honduras, right after, real estate and diamonds.
Gotcha. And is he the one that taught you all of that?
Yep.
Okay. So we have our timeline now. So it's tile company, which really you talk about that being more of a small business. but even that seems like you were pretty good about outsourcing and making sure that you didn't have to physically be laying tile, right?
No, I did it all.
You did it all?
I did it for 12 years.
So then you would take a break then off of it and just not take any jobs while you went in the mission field?
That was the very first, when I went on to Honduras, I just took a break.
Okay.
But after Honduras, when I went to that wedding 2 days later, he said, I'll teach you. The next day I went to his house and he said, you're going to have to quit your business in order to do this. I did. 2 weeks later, I made my first $40,000. Everything changed so fast. It was December 8th of 1998 is when I made my first $40,000 check. And then by October 29th of 1999, I had like 3 million in real estate and loads of diamonds and cash. 10 months, God literally changed my life dramatically.
So you see, you have talk about the part where he kind of gives you a little test, your mentor, where he was like,
yeah, he was like, while we were at this wedding, you say, Rick, how are you? How are things going? And I'm all excited to just come back from my first mission trip. And, and after, years of God preparing me, and it just could have come flowing out of me, the authority of Jesus and who he is, and, walking in power and victory and joy. And he was a guy that came out of Catholicism, and extremely wealthy. Like he was in his late 50s, I think, when we met. And he was making $1 million a month at 21 years old. Like he had Uber at that time. He was worth about 40 or 50 million. I think he was worth a lot more than that, but he was the type of person that did not show it. He would pay a great deal of money to hide his money. And so he always had me around people that were very wealthy, like extremely wealthy, like billionaires, but you would not know that they had billions when you went to their house. They would live like average people. And he would, he would take me to like real estate icons that owned like thousands of hotels. And I'm like, these people, really? The Patels? Like everyone knows who the Patels are in real estate. I'd go see the Patel and he'd have like a $20 wig on his head, a really bad toupee and old Mercedes and, 15 people living in the same house. And I'm like, this is the guy. And he'd be doing $1 billion deals with different countries and with, estate jewelry that belonged to like the kings and the princes and all of that royalty. It did big deals. And so the people that he introduced me to they didn't show what they had, it really showed me something completely different, because those were the people that had the most impressive to me, because they weren't arrogant. Right. And so like when I stepped into a period where everyone wanted me to show wealth, it was very awkward to me. It felt very cheap. It felt very cheesy. And still today, like most people don't know what I have unless they come to my home. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't operate like that. I love where I live. I love being on the beach, but like, celebrities are my neighbors. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's Magic Johnson's house,
I have a little side thing for this, which is really interesting. So I grew up humble beginnings as well. We used to come surf Salt Creek all the time when I was younger. Salt Creek and Strands. Strands is my favorite beach to this day. And I would walk down where it's over here, where the grass is, and we'd have picnics and stuff. And I remember looking at all these houses in this neighborhood and be like, one day I will be able to talk to these people, because I didn't feel the courage to actually talk to these people, right? And then finally, fast forward to when I'm 16 years old, I'm surfing Strands, and there's one of the houses that has the gym, it's a round house in the front of the beach and has a gym on top. And I finally got to a point where I was just like, what are they going to tell me? They're just going to tell me no if I just ask. So I went to the door, I knocked on the door, and I talked to the person. I said, hey, one day I'm going to own this house. He goes, oh, you're going to do that, let me show you your house then. And he walks me through the house. And that was the first time I ever seen a house of that size and luxury and everything else. And it changed my whole entire mindset. And as I'm walking through there, I'm noticing that there's nothing richy about the house besides the house itself. And he was so humble. I mean, just wearing just so nice about everything and all that stuff. So it was a full circle moment because I knew that you lived in this area because obviously we went to, Ritz-Carlton for lunch a few times, but I never had your address obviously to find. And when you sent me this neighborhood, I was just like, wow, full circle moment. Because young Jerry was literally walking on those looking at these houses thinking like, I just want to know what they do. Not I'm going to have one of these houses one day. I just want to know what they do. I want to have a conversation. So now we're sitting here almost 4 hours into a podcast and I get my dream. So what did that teach you that when you saw real wealth? Because I think that's what people make the mistake of is people that are flaunting it really don't have the wealth because they still have the ego around it, where really it's funny. The more I start to realize the people that are flaunting everything and making sure people see the flaunting, right? They usually have very little and they're chasing this ego. But the people that, have the real wealth, that when you start to really dive into it, it's like they just don't even want to show it because they really have it. And they know that, just like we talked about offline, trust and making sure all the money is away, because I can't imagine that Rick Gutman has much money to his name because you're a smart business person. So when I hear young entrepreneurs say, my goal is to have over $1 million in the bank, it's like that just showcases their ignorance, because your money is doing nothing in the bank. And you get a very wealthy person that sees that statement. They're just like, oh, this kid's an idiot. Right?
Well, the point is to own nothing.
Yes.
You want to be broke on paper.
So why? Let's dive into that.
Well, I mean, without taking too far of a bunny trail, I mean, you want your trusts to own everything, because now nobody can take it. You don't want to own anything, especially in the day and age that we live in. It's such a litigious atmosphere. Everybody's trying to sue people and take their assets. The best thing for you to do is to be broke on paper, but have your companies or your trusts own everything, right? That's real protection. That's real security. And when somebody says, I want to have 10 million in the bank, well, just depends on how they're saying it, but hopefully it's in a trust, or hopefully it's in a corporation or some sort of an entity. Nothing as good as certain trusts, nothing. But if it's just sitting in their bank, of course, two things. One is you always want your money working harder than you are, right? Because people can make money, but systems create wealth. You want systems, you want assets, not liabilities. But within that, you don't want to have anything in your own name, because people, if you kill somebody on the way home or whatever, they can take everything that you have.
Not even just that. I don't think people recognize this. We have a client that's one of the best attorneys in Southern California, personal injury attorney, and he's really good at what he does. And he will get some cases that we will do some social media about. And it was literally somebody driving and the other person hitting them. And he will then represent the person who is really at fault, if you really look at it from a person way, like a real way. And he will then take $2, $4, $3, $6 million from these people. And the settlements are huge. And we're realizing that it's not even about people thinking that the ignorance of like, oh, well, what if it's your fault? It's like, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do that stuff. Yeah. It could be not even be your fault, but then they look and they say, oh, okay, he's got something. The judge usually then goes with the person who has enough money for it. And then usually they lose the case. So what you're talking about is putting your money, which is still your money, you can still control it, but it's out of your name completely. So when they look at a Rick Gutman or a Jared Carver on paper, there's nothing there for them to grab. And more importantly, it's structuring it in a way where there's anonymity, right? Where there is no track of how they can even find it, which is what you're talking about, which is why you said a statement that's a little higher level that I want to dummy down for people. You talk about where is the money actually going to be? Hopefully it's in a company, but you still can kind of find that But you can still track that back to a company. But what you're saying is preferably in a trust, because most trusts are locked and you cannot even touch that, right? Especially when we talk about revocable trust versus irrevocable trust, right? If it's irrevocable on paper, the law is just like, you don't even own it. You can't even touch that. It's completely away. So that's why I think there's an interesting thing where a lot of people will ask me, like, people expose themselves, and I was there as well. I'm sure you were before. You learned all this stuff as well. And there's steps to wealth. And that's why it's interesting when people expose themselves through their financial literacy with what they actually say. And so that's why I love to listen to what they think about their goals are actually at, right? When you have a goal, it's just like, I want $1 million cash in my bank account. Okay, like your bank account? Yeah. It's like, okay, so that they're going to realize that that's actually not what they want, and they have to get there. So you need to talk to those people differently than you talk to somebody else that starts to talk about trust. I mean, I sent you over a voice memo a few months ago, and I said, hey, if you were my age, knowing that you have, 2 kids, 2 boys, and put yourself in my situation, what would you do? And just like typical Rick Gutman's, he doesn't give me the whole entire thing. He just says, look up these trusts. They're very, very sophisticated. And so I went to ChatGPT and I started diving into it. And I went to multiple attorneys and started then trying to figure out, and most attorneys can't do this, by the way. I paid a lot of money for an attorney who I found out then didn't do it the right way. So now we had to hire a different attorney. So that was about a $10,000 mistake, unfortunately. But the cool thing about it is with the cost of business. And so during the process, I learned 2 things. Number one, ask better questions and go in and learn it. And that $10,000 mistake for me actually was education about, like, okay, got it. There's an attorney that doesn't even know. Like, I'm thinking every attorney knows how to do these structures, and it's not, right?
Not these ones.
And so you're starting to learn where it's like, this is the education that you have built for so long that I'm so interested in. And so let's go back so we don't get too off topic, but it all kind of combines. The aspect of your mentor, then him introducing you to the different, real estate moguls and wealthy people. What's the first thing that you're able to see? Was it that, being rich and wealthy is 2 different things? Did you even recognize that from the beginning? Was it more of that you were surrounded by these people and you felt weird to even show success because you knew they had so much more than you? And so if you start showing that you're a big dog, really you realize that you're really not anything. Was that the concept, or was it, did you ever
No, I mean, I was just learning. The people that I was exposed to in the beginning, like, I had nothing. I didn't know how to talk to. I didn't have $1 million. I didn't have $1 million, and I didn't have good credit. And he taught me how to buy land, how to do land contracts, and how to raise money, and how to I didn't have to own the land. I only needed to control the land. And we used no banks and no personal credit.
Like credit finance subject twos?
It was all owner financed. And so I just paid interest only payments on big land deals and controlled it all. That was my first exposure. And these individuals had everything. They had hotels, they had real estate, they had the diamond and gemstone, empires. They had everything that very extremely wealthy people have, but what they had that I was unaware of is humility. They weren't flaunting anything. So like, they were way bigger than me. They were just teaching me. And so I just assumed that my world changed, that I began to assume that the richest people in the world, you wouldn't even know who they were. And so then as I began to get around people that had wealth, they didn't have wealth, they had riches, I guess. They were showing and talking about it and bragging, and they were obnoxious people to be around. And so I had 2 exposures. I felt like I learned the right way in the beginning, and then I was exposed to all of the cheap, shallow positions. Like, this one had presence and these had position.
The credit card warriors.
These people actually had both. You know what I mean? And then when I stepped into the direct selling industry, everything was like show yourself in front of this car and this house and look what I have. And, and it was always odd for me because I never participated in that. Even though I was one of the top earners in the world, I taught every one of my team members that you need strength, and you need humility, and you need financial education, and you don't need to show anything that you have. And you need to go through the fire and learn everything the hard way. And then as you continue to pass the test, when you get up on that platform or that stage, or it's time for you to speak, everyone will hear you because your capacity of how you understand the topic that you're talking about, you will own the stage. You'll have presence. And so when we would do large meetings and there'd be other speakers from other teams, all these other speakers would get up there and talk about and be teaching people about their business strategies. And I'd be sitting there, and whenever one of my team members, people that I mentored, they'd get up there and they're like, really clear who Overcome Nation is. Like, my speakers, literally, you could hear a pin drop because they all got their asses kicked in the process. And that's the only way to learn, right? You got to go through the fires. If you want presence, you got to go through the fire. And so when they got up, and mind you, in the beginning, many of these people were, they would pass out on the stage. One would like be throwing up in their mouth. Like, they were petrified of getting up there and speaking to large crowds. Petrified. They did not want to be seen. But, as I began to pour into them and teach them and show them and equip them, when they got on that platform and it was their time to speak, they knew that they belonged there. They earned it. And that was presence. It wasn't position. They ended up having both.
It's interesting. Wow, I think it's the world is the 1%, because you go online and you go to YouTube and you go to your social media is all set up with top 3 tips. Here's the best thing you can do tomorrow. And it's hooky into call to action, hooky call to action, hooky call to action, right? And the thing I've always realized about the most successful people, and you just hit it, is there is no shortcuts at all. There's a guy that I was mentored by when I was younger too. This is when I was a freshman in high school. I became best friends with his son, real estate guy. He developed pretty much 50% of all Corona in California over here. Didn't come from much, just built his whole entire portfolio. And this guy was a workhorse. He would have the same schedule every single day. Because I lived with their family when I was a senior in high school. That's a longer story, but I got to actually experience what life was like in the home because I lived with them for multiple months. And he would breakfast be on the table at 8:00 every single morning. He would leave by 8:30. He would go to the office. This guy couldn't even go to the bathroom in anybody else's office. He would come home every day at 12:15 sharp and go to the bathroom, then go back to the office. And he did this every single day, right? Well, I now take my bike route every Saturday and I go by his office, and guess where he is every single day to this day. And this is 16 years in the making now. And he has all the money in the world. 9:15, his car is outside the office. Nobody else is there. And people don't see that stuff. They don't see the why those people are successful. It's because there was no shortcuts. And more importantly is, do you see how some people are more, oh, I'm only going to work hard if I get this outcome, right? You start to realize the people that have more of a passion and they have a purpose, more importantly, that's where I want to get into with you, is what you taught me is, if you allow God to be your CEO, then you're not going to want to just create a stream. You're going to want to create a river. And that was so powerful for me because it changed everything from me being at the top, because our brains get to a point where it's like, oh, it's good enough, right? I can only imagine a certain goal. So like when I was younger, my goal was, if I buy a Rolex, I'm going to be happy. I couldn't think above that whole thing, right? That I bought my first Rolex and I was happy. I was very happy for a long time. And then I got to a point where I was like, wasn't good enough, right? And then what's next? What's next? And it started doing this thing where it kind of got to a point where now I've outpaced all of my dreams, which are very low, by the way. And I came to you as my mentor, and I remember I was talking to you about this, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm being complacent because I've already hit all the dreams I wanted. And mind you, I'm coming from nothing, so I don't have these huge dreams. I'm content with life. I got a great wife. I got a great family. I got, my dream car I had when I was younger. I had the Rolex, and it was just empty. And you told me that if you start to have a purpose behind your money, and you said something to me that was actually phrased in a different way that you phrased in the book, but you said, when a wire comes into me, a wire goes out the same day. And I always have a purpose for my money. And I always know where it's going before that money even comes in. And it changed my whole perspective around money, because now it became about when money, I need to go get more money, because when I can impact people, that is so much bigger than any of the materialistic things I say. And I tell the people that I coach now, the interesting thing is if you put your goal, which is a watch, a Rolex, something materialistic on the table, but then you had a little video right here to see, let's say this is a $10,000 watch, but you had a video to see if I gave $10,000 to this family and what the impact it would be, and you could watch what their impact would, most people would actually click on this. They would do that. But because we have this scarcity mindset versus abundance that you talk about, you start to look at just what do you want? What do you want? And that well dries out so quickly. And so I want you to talk about like the purpose for you for money, because it's not chasing the next thing, the next materialism thing. Okay, now I want this. Like, and some people set goals, which I think setting goals is important, but walk me through what you'd share with me one-on-one about why it's so important to have wire in, wire out, and why you are a good servant of your money and a better steward of it as well.
Well, I mean, you could do it man's way or you can do it God's way. You know, God is looking for kings that he can establish his will through, not to, but through. And so he's looking for kings that he can operate through as a conduit to establish his will that won't clog up the pipeline by putting it in their own pocket. Like, he wants you to enjoy the fruits of all that along the way. You could afford anything that you want, and that's not a bad thing. And you can grab all the nice things that you like. But when you look at it on paper, what's actually going to in the direction he wants it to go through along the way, right? And that's the law of reaping and sowing. And if you sow little, you'll reap little. If you sow abundantly, you'll reap abundantly. And in the Old Testament, in Malachi, it says, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. And they say, what? In tithes and offerings. He said, bring the tithe into the storehouse, and for your benefit, I will fill up your storehouses where you can't even contain them. So all he's saying is, for every $10, give me one. Mm. Give it to who I want you to give it to. Give it back to me. For every 10, give me one. Not a bad deal, right? And that's in the Old Testament under the law. On this side of the cross, it's not mandatory. A lot of pastors fight against it. It's mandatory to me because it's a biblical truth. It's a biblical economic to where, why would I ever want to operate without that? I would not have what I have today without the tithe and the offering. And so the kings that God is raising up, the entrepreneurs, the better you are at finding those areas of being a blessing to the people that God wants to bless, the more he can trust you with it, the more he'll continue to give you. If he gives you 10 and you give 1, you're like, okay, I can do that. And then he gives you 100 and you give 10, you're like, I can do that. Then he gives you 1,000 and you give 100. And then he gives you 10,000, you give 1,000. Then he gives you 100,000, you give 10,000, right? When he gives you 1,000,000, you're like, oh my gosh, can I give 100,000? Start stopping him up, And I failed at some of those tests along the way. But then I realized things start drying up. He's not flowing through me. And so I learned that I already have plans for the money before it comes in. I don't want to hang on to it. I don't want to have sticky fingers, because if I want to operate in his kingdom, I need to further the kingdom. And so I start paying attention to what are some areas that are making a real difference. It doesn't have to be to a church. Churches love to claim it, but unless you're getting fed by the church and like that's where you sow your tithe, wonderful. Well, I don't have any problem with that, but just listen to the Lord. Where does he want you to send the money? And I have found different ministries in either in this country or in this state, or certain people that are making a difference, or in other countries that are making that. Many of those ministries, people don't even know who they are, but I know that they're making a world of difference, and they're putting their whole lives at stake or at risk in order to see it through. And like, I love sowing seed into those places, because now I'm a partaker of that. For every person that they save, or every person that they heal, or every wonderful thing that they do, every difference that they make, I'm in there somewhere. I get to share in that credit. I love that. Right. And I get to help further the kingdom. So the more of those that I'm aware of, the more effective I am in the earth. And so I pray for those things. Lord, give me eyes to see, because there is a difference between soil. I write about it in the book. Jesus said there are certain returns, some 30, some 30-fold blessing, some 60-fold blessing, and some 100-fold blessing. So if he said that, should I still just give randomly? Well, there are places for that, but like as an entrepreneur, like, why did Jesus say that then? Why didn't he just say everybody gets blessed if you do that? Why did he give us 3 different options? So are you telling me, Lord, that there is a 30 return soil, and there's a 60 return soil, and there's 100 return soil? That tells me I should pay attention to some of the soil. And some of the soil isn't the biggest company that's out there. It could be some small little thing that somebody's making a huge difference in maybe one person's life. But you don't know that one person could be a would-be king.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we can't put our own frame of reference on what the size of it. It's wherever he says there's riches, you get that feeling. You're like, this is good soil. Or you see that difference, or you know where it's going, and you've prayed or fasted or both. And he shows you, like, I have found there are certain soils that I sow into that was like, dang, I didn't see that coming. That gave me way more than 100-fold blessing. And as an entrepreneur, I can't shut that off. Yeah. So it makes me want to I can sow and not really think too much about it. And that'll probably give me a 30% blessing in some, but why not pay attention to everything?
Can you give me that framework of how you look at it? Because you're taking an entrepreneurship approach, which I think is interesting. Are you almost looking at it like an investment or a framework of entrepreneurship where you're seeking that soil?
Yeah, but I'm investing in people.
Yeah. Okay. So how are you seeking those people? Sometimes it could be both. Does it just come to you on your lap sometimes? Or
I hear about it. You know what I mean? It's like when you're in the space of furthering the kingdom, and God knows that you are sowing seed into different charitable organizations or ministries or people. Maybe sometimes it's just a person of need.
Yeah.
It could be a moment of need where that soul all of a sudden becomes the richest, and maybe has nothing to do with who they're blessing. Maybe it's just like the Lord just saying, no, I just want you to pay attention. The 30, 60, and 100-fold blessing is wherever he is listening to his voice. We're back to that. Like, don't take the recipe. He is the recipe, right? We're back to that place of listening to the sound of his voice, not mine. Because I could look at something and go, oh man, that's going to be a great one. And they're making all kinds of difference, but I don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it. And then there could be something that looks very menial that could have the richest soil of all, because God was like, you didn't really hear me on that one. I want you to hear me on this one. And you're like, I'm not sure. Okay. And boom, you do it. And you're just like, wow, God shows you. And in different blessings, it doesn't always have to be monetarily, although monetarily is always part of it. What is what I mean by that? Like we reap a harvest on everything that we sow, through what we say, who we say it to, whether it's money. Like if I sow apple seeds, what am I going to get? Apples. If I sow oranges, I'm going to get oranges. So you don't sow apple seeds expecting oranges. Mm-hmm. So if I want to be blessed financially, I give financially. Mm-hmm. If I want to be blessed with good relationships, I'm going to sow seeds of truth and gratitude and seeds of friendship, then I'm going to have a harvest. I'm going to have a rich friendships or a harvest of good friends. If I sow lies and deceit, I'm going to be surrounded by liars and deceivers. You know what I'm saying? So everything we do, we have to do knowing that everything is seed. Everything is you're sowing and reaping. So when it comes to financial seed, I look for, in my mind, where are some of the greatest needs that are happening. If God highlights something to me, then I know that's really good seed. And if he doesn't then I continue to sow into the areas that I've been sowing. But I love it when he shows me something like, a lady that I know that has a small ministry. She's devoted her entire life to Jesus. She's not married, completely devoted to him. And she's given me some words that have been life-changing at moments when I really need it. Like the presence of God is all over this woman. And when she prays for people, they get healed. I see God's presence in her life. And then God will put it on my heart to sow a seed into her ministry. And she's in Australia. And then she'll call me crying. You have no idea. I'm supposed to leave for New Zealand tomorrow on this mission trip. And I had no money in my bank account. She's bawling her head off. I'm just like, Lord, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. Like, I love that type of listening, And so you become addicted to being a difference maker in ministries and in people's lives, and there are many times where you're just like, I'm not sowing every seed with the intention as I want 100-fold, because that's not the point.
The heart, yeah.
The point is recognizing if you can recognize really great seed, pay attention to it, If I get so she goes to New Zealand and 1,000 people give their lives to Jesus, man, that's great soil, right? Regardless of what the return is. I just think that God is a mathematician. He does everything with his perfect order. And if Jesus said there's some 30, some 60, and some 100, and there's something in there that I need to know, then I want to go for what is the richest soil, because to bless my life in multiple ways, not just financial. But then on a larger scale, you start doing things where money starts really coming in, and you can't, when you have a lot of money to give, you're just like, if I give this ministry too much, it'll hurt them.
Interesting.
Because they'll squander it. So you have to start you have to create a whole new account just for sowing into people's lives, because you're like, man, the money just keeps coming in and this pot gets larger and larger. I can't give it away fast enough, because now if I just gave it all to one person, it would destroy them. So now you have to have this pool, this ministry fund, to where you're like constantly looking at where to put the money, at the quickest pace as possible, without just going, $500,000 came in, I got to give it to one person. No, you start dividing it into different channels.
Well, it's interesting because as you're building a business, right, it's like the financial literacy is so important, because I'm coaching, would call them lower end entrepreneurs, right? And what I notice is the number one thing across all boards is they don't know their finances. They don't know their financial scoreboard. They have no idea what's coming in, what's going out. And so the first thing I do is I stop the bleed for them. And so I audit, like, do you know how much you're spending? No idea. Do you know how much you're making? They usually know that. We start to audit everything, and we locate off the bat $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 of just pointless bleed. And they're like, I never even knew this. Because what they do is they wait for their accountant to get them their P&Ls, and then they look at their accounts. They're like, okay, I was profitable by this much this month. The problem with that is when you get kicked in the mouth, and then all of a sudden you're thinking revenue only versus profit. You could be making $500,000 in revenue, but then your expenses are above 550. The scoreboard is you lost 50,000. So you're better off almost making 60,000 and doing 50,000 expenses. You at least keep 10,000, right? Yeah. So when we first break that down, I realized that they're just like, oh my gosh, like now I can see for the first time, right? I talk about being a coach in sports where if the coach didn't know the scoreboard, he wouldn't be able to coach effectively, right? In basketball, you got to realize that if you're down by 30, you change your strategy, right? You start full court pressing, you start shooting threes, you start not running the shot clock out. If you're up by 30, you want to hold the ball a little longer. You want to draw the run good plays, get good shots, right?
Yeah.
And so as you're building that, I'm realizing that the people that have a scarcity mindset, just like you said, what you reap, you'll sow, they're reaping the scarcity, and because they're holding on to it because they remember the fear of like, oh no, now I have my first $10,000, $50,000. I'm just going to hold on to it, have it close to my chest. The money is gone after that.
Yeah.
Like, because the scarcity is now you're reaping the scarcity as well. And so for you being high level entrepreneur, running multiple businesses, be in different industries, how do you track your money? Are you always tracking your money? Do you know what's in every single account? Are you diligent with it? Or do you just do what these guys do and just say, oh, I guess I make so much money, so it just comes through and I have enough?
No. And this is not recommended for the way I run my life, and my business is not recommended from most people that are very meticulous about where their money's at and what it's doing. For me personally, I found it many times when I know exactly where it's at, it causes me to hold on to it a little bit tighter. And for me, I've tend to not pay as much attention to it because money doesn't own me. Money is fluid. And what I mean by that is like I'm abundance. I'm richer than I have ever been. Right here. Like, God is my partner. It's not a bank account. Like, he's abundant, therefore I am abundant. He is rich, therefore I am rich, right? There are times where I've had nothing and never even worried about it at all because the next business deal would bring in a couple of $1,000,000. And there's so much of that over time to where money, the fear of money completely lost its grip on me completely, to where like it's all his anyways, So the only thing that I do make sure of is that I know what's in each coffer. So it's not, because I've had accounts that people were siphoning money out of, that tens upon tens of thousands of dollars. And it took, every day, to where it took months for me to figure out that something was even missing, and I was like, dude, how did it take 6 months for me to notice that people have been stealing money from my account? I sat down with my bank and they replaced it all, but still, so I've learned to pay attention to that. But some people are very meticulous. Now they have, obviously, you probably have software that handles all of that. But I don't really pay attention to that as much because I've never used it as a point of reference of what I have and what I don't have. I just don't like thinking about a budget. I stopped living on a budget, I don't know, 15 years ago. Because I found that the highs and lows would scare me. If I got down to a certain amount, I would freak out and people would be like, are you kidding me? I never had that kind of money in the bank. My bills are $40,000 a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, it was nerve wracking for me to constantly pay attention what was going on, because there are months where I'm not profitable at all.
Yeah.
There's been 2 years where I wasn't profitable at all. Because like building a foundation and doing even with building my STELOMARE business, right now, like all of my efforts is what I'm building right now, and there are times where you're building something and you don't make one penny, you don't make one dime. And because you're building the foundation, it's like that building, you're spending, 1 year just building the foundation before you even see one floor go up. And then all of a sudden the floor goes up overnight.
Yeah.
But you got to understand that even when you're in that foundation, you're still making a glut of money. You just haven't turned on the switch yet. you know?
Let me clarify this because I want to make sure it's what you're saying. So if you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of money, this is not Rick saying don't track any of it ever. Oh, he's good. What he's saying is he's using the actual system of God in abundance and not having the money be the slave over him. So there's actually a balance, right? If you're a young entrepreneur, you should at least know your money. Now, you shouldn't be obsessed over it in terms of just looking at it every single hour and looking at it, right? There's a balance between not having it be your idol, but also having an abundance mindset. Because if you take the abundance mindset, you take God out of what you're talking about, that person is now, it's the reason why debt and all these different things are enslaving to people, right? They're never able to actually have freedom. They're not ever like, they have a scarcity mindset. That's my parents, right? Didn't have much money, a lot of debt, and the house was always financial scarcity and stress because of finances, right? You look at the number one reason why divorces happen is because of financial hardships, right? And so what he's really saying, and this is a higher level view, is do you see how he always puts God first in everything? And that is the operating system, is God. Now, if you're listening to this and saying, well, Rick Gutman has a lot of money and he doesn't track anything, he just wants to make sure no one's stealing from him, so I'm not going to track it either, you're removing God from the whole entire thing. And so I love what I read about this. It's almost like, and I think a lot of people do this, it's stealing a car. You can still drive it, right? You don't own the title. You can still drive it. It still operates. It still works the exact same way. You're driving the car. It looks like a car. It looks like it's yours. But you get found out when you get pulled over and they look at your title and they look at you don't own it, right? That's removing God. God is the title of the whole thing, right? You could still operate these things, but then you'll get to a certain point where it will work, and then all of a sudden you get found out. And I think that goes into like new age teaching, right? Yeah. Where a lot of people will use, I think Tony Robbins does this at the highest level. It's interesting how he uses all principles in the Bible, but he never gives God credit, right? And he kind of goes through all these different, pecking orders, which I think he's a genius. But it's funny because he gets 99% there. And the 1% more is just giving God glory, because he teaches everything in the Bible, right? Everything about like principles and tithing. And he says on one of the podcasts I was watching, he's like, I don't know what it is. People give money and they get money back. It's like, well, there's something in there, right? It talks about all that, but he never talks about it in a standpoint. So I don't know if you saw the podcast with him and Alex Hormozy. Did you ever see that?
No.
So it's really interesting because Alex Hormozy, you know who that is?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So it was the first time Alex Hormozy was actually like terrified to be on a podcast. It was just like deer in headlights, right? Well, the very first part of the episode, when you watch it, you'll notice that Tony kind of just talks about all his accolades, right? Look behind you. I got all, I wasn't a sports guy. I wanted to be a sports guy, but now I own teams. Now we won the world championship, right? I have, multi-billion-dollar businesses, and he's doing all this different stuff. And Alex is deer in headlights the whole entire time the first time. And people are like, commenting that and everything. And the whole time I was watching it, I was like, wow, this has been so interesting. If King Solomon had a podcast and had Tony on, Tony would be Alex and King Solomon would be Tony. And I didn't really know how true that statement was, but I looked into like the wealth they project King Solomon to actually have. And it was like close to like $1.6 billion a year from what they can account with just gold. And like they can't even account for it, right? Well, Tony Robbins is worth like $4 billion total in all net worth, right? Yeah. So the levels of it, then you have Alex Hormozy worth $100 million. And so I look at that whole thing, and I think a lot of Christians think they have a poverty mindset and a scarcity mindset where it's like, you're not supposed to be wealthy. You're not supposed to have any money. It's bad to have money. Money is the root of all evil, right? But then you start to look at the Bible and you realize that David was extremely wealthy. You look at how much he put into the temple and what that actually looks like, right? You have King Solomon, who's extremely wealthy. You have a bunch of people in the Bible that were extremely wealthy. And I think a lot of people just think about the disciples and like, well, look, God took the fishermen and people that weren't that wealthy, but it wasn't like Jesus was walking around with no money. It was people were pouring into him. He had the abundance mindset, right? He had all these different things. And so that's what you talk about in the book. That was so clear to me, where you were so against what the Western church usually says, how I was grown up too, which is money is bad. I mean, my dad always taught me like, don't be a slave to it, like all these different things, and which that's the right standpoint. But it was almost like if you had money, that was of the devil, right? So talk about that a little bit for us, because that kind of prevents people. If the devil can tempt people and convince them that money is bad, then they'll never take the leap of faith, right? They'll think they have too much, and all of a sudden they're like, and then what happens? They usually self-sabotage themselves. So dive into that part of the book a little bit, because that was really fascinating for me.
I have a lot to say about this topic because there was a lot for me to break away from, and there was even more that I need to teach other people to break away from, because everyone was born in different households that had different feelings and different religious backgrounds that changed their perspective on what money was to them based on many things: religion, whether they were white collar, blue collar, whether they're wealthy. There's so many different dynamics on how people approached money that it became my job first thing to teach people about money and whether they deserved it or not. And seeing it operate in the church my whole young life, and then having to revisit the church and hit the restart button on the minds of all these young individuals that felt guilty for being successful, or felt guilty because they had ambition, felt guilty about doing business because, many of them felt bad because they weren't pastors or weren't going to Bible school or whatever, but they had an anointing to do business. There was just so much of that. And I walked all of that out personally because I wasn't sure whether I was a priest or a king. I had great love for both. I just wanted to please God and be happy, and never wanted to live on a budget. And I've seen so many things, but I think like that whole poverty spirit, the roots of poverty came from old Catholicism, where everybody had to be poor and pay for the tithes and the offerings, and the church was rich, and it was such an abuse of power. And somehow when people go through, as it bled into the Protestant faith and the reformers of, reading the Bible for yourself and not having some priest read it for you and teaching you about something you had no natural knowledge of, somehow I think a lot of that has bled into the teaching and the acceptance into the root system of the modern day church, that money is evil. And they take a handful of scriptures and remove the context out of it and say that, that being wealthy is bad, right? It's the love of money that is the root of all evil, the love of it, the desire for it, the lust for it. It's the desire for money and power and things. When the entire Bible is loaded with God pointing out people that were blessed, and he said they were blessed because they had gold and they had cattle and they had land and they had silver and they had slaves and they had all of the things that the tangible world, the shallow world go, well, I want that. Well, so then what was it? Was it good or bad? God, the writer of the book, was literally saying they were blessed. Isaac sowed in the land, and the same year he reaped a 100-fold blessing, and the man began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous, so much that the Philistines envied him. Was he in sin? No, he wasn't. He was blessed. And so all through the Bible, we see this over and over, that a man was blessed, and you could tell he was blessed because of what God had given him. So where did he change it? The point is, he didn't change it. He just wants to be first. And a greedy man won't sow. And there's a way to create wealth. And from the moment we discover gold in the Bible, it says the gold, and there's gold in the land, and the gold is good. Like right out of the gate, like gold is being communicated as being gold, it being good. It's neutral. It's what you do with it. God is surrounded by gold. You walk on streets of gold. Like it's makes no sense that God is surrounded by all of the different foundations of jasper and topaz and crystal and diamond and emerald and all of these beautiful things that are the foundations of all these parts of heaven that he surrounds himself. But at the same time, he's going to tell us that having abundance or being money or gold or things like that is evil. What a lie. He just wants you to build it his way. When he comes first and he's first in your life, and you prove it by being generous, you prove it by the tithe, the offering, you prove it that money doesn't have a hold on you by letting him flow through you, and you won't be able to stop the money from coming in. The one thing you need to pay attention to is not what you have, is, are you paying the tithe? Are you sowing into the earth? Are as it comes through, is he able to flow through you like a conduit? When he gives it to you, it's going out the door, establishing his will. That's the only thing in my perspective that I have ever needed to pay attention to. What's going out is more important than what's coming in. As long as I pay attention to what's coming out, I never have to worry about what's coming in, ever. And the more that it goes out, the more comes in. You don't have to even worry about that, right? So that's the one principle that is the decider of everything. And so when we get to heaven, like I said in the book, like, nobody is like trying to chip up streets of gold and put it in their pocket. So the kings have to have that same, I walk on pavement of gold attitude here on earth as they would in heaven. Can you operate like that to where no amount of gold will have a hold on your heart? No amount of money will have a hold on your heart, because Jesus is your treasure. He is your pearl of great price. And it's easy to say that, but it's a process. Anyone says, well, no amount of money. I don't know. Maybe if God gave me $1 billion right now, maybe I would hoard it. I don't know it. I've never been faced with that kind of temptation before. But you know what? That's where the humility comes in. That's the difference maker right there, is knowing that I can fall to sin, not like I've already conquered that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I can't say that no, there isn't a test out there that the devil can put me through that I won't fail. That's the beginning. That's pride and arrogance. Like, pride comes before a fall. Knowing that I can be deceived, knowing that I can fail tests, knowing that I have a fallen nature, knowing that the more imperfect I am, the greater need that I have for God. Like, He is the designer of my life. Knowing that if I take one or two steps off, I'm at the beginning of a fall. Knowing that, like, I am fallible is the best place that I could ever be for Him to trust me with more and more, right? Because the more He gives you, the greater the test, right? But as soon as He starts pouring in and pouring in and pouring in and pouring in, and you start taking more and giving less, He starts slowing down the tap, because He doesn't want to destroy you.
It's so interesting how you're using those words, because the connection I made with money, right, is they reference money in like water, right? Cash flow, liquid. When you're in debt, you're underwater, right? You keep your money in a bank, river bank, right? And so what you're talking about is it's a flow, right? And when people hoard it, scarcity mindset, the water stays still. What happens to the water stays still? It gets bad, right? And so what you're talking about is when the money comes out, just like you said, wire in, wire out, right? It's flowing through you, and that is the actual abundance, right? You almost are the tap with the tap being open, but right when you turn that tap off, and then the abundance is not abundance anymore because you don't believe in that. You believe in scarcity, and scarcity produces nothing. So when you started saying that, it started clicking all these things for me, because I'm like, I always knew that money was related to water, right? And that's why the banks are always, once you give their money, what do they do with it? They try to get it out as quickly as possible, right? And so they understand that. But then the average American, the average person is afraid, right? That's why Rockefeller's quote is, I want a nation full of workers, not thinkers, right? He understood that very well, because if you just keep people poor, even from the standpoint of like what Robert Kiyosaki talks about, what quadrant are you a part of? Employees pay the most taxes. And when you start to look at all that stuff, you're like, no wonder the government wants to keep the employees in that mindset, because it usually goes to scarcity. And it's a mindset game too. I talked to a guy in Austin, Texas. He was our bellman, And he said, where are you guys from? And we're like, Orange County. He's like, where's that? We're like, Southern California. He's like, oh, like by San Diego? We're like, yeah. He's like, I'm surprised I haven't said the word San Diego because I can't even afford to say the word, right? Like, you see how the mindset is so locked in place where it's like, I will never have this. Again, you're not listening to the authority of the Bible. You're listening to what man has taught you about the Bible, which a lot of pastors and a lot of people that are out there, including, parents and people that don't know the Bible correctly, they will hear somebody say like money is the root of all evil. And I think that's the most mistranslated verse in the Bible.
Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the gates of heaven, kingdom of heaven. The very next verse he says, but all things are possible in the kingdom of God. So he gives you the warning, but then he tells you, but all things are possible. Again, he's double downing on the fact that if you do it his way, that's not impossible now. It's actually highly possible. But let me take this whole thing much further so people get a better perspective on flow. People always say that Jesus was poor. And then others say, no, he was rich. Just that they cast lots for his clothing because it was so fine. I've heard both perspectives, that Jesus was rich, that, Judas was stealing money the entire time and nobody knew it. Now, if you only have like $20 on the tray and somebody steals $5, everyone's going to know it. So there must have been a lot of money in there. I've heard that side too. None of that stuff is a point of reference for me at all, though. Here's my point of reference, is that Jesus had need of nothing, but owned everything. If they needed to pay the taxes, he said, go to the fish over there. That fish is going to swim up and give you a silver coin. You're going to find a silver coin, use that, pay the taxes. If you were sick, he would just pray for you and you'd get healed. If you died like Lazarus, he'd just pray you back. If you had a withered hand, he'd just pray for you and grow your hand back. If you were, when they were short on feeding 5,000, he's like, what do you have? They're like, we have two fish and a loaf of bread. He breaks it, multiplies it and feeds 5,000. And there's like 12 baskets that are left over and fish and all of that. So he's multiplying whatever they have. He's healing everyone. There's no death that can stop him from bringing you back to life. He didn't want to. There's no lack of money because the fish will just come and bring it to you. That's not being poor. That's like if I said to either one of you, I want you to go around the world, take nothing with you but your ID. But no matter where you go, any airport, any restaurant, any bank, whatever, here's the master code. So you can go to any ATM you want in the world and just pull out whatever you need as you need it. You don't have to run with $1 million loaded in your suitcases. There are ATMs all over the world as you need it. Just use the code and you have it anywhere you want. You're like, well, wait a second. That's like an infinite amount of money, Rick. I'm like, well, yeah. And you're like, well, so you're telling me that I don't need to like pack a suitcase or bring a debit card and no, what I'm saying is you have the master code and no matter where you go, whatever you have need of, just go use that code at the ATM and you have as much cash as you need.
So good.
That's exactly the way Jesus operated. Even the wind and the waves didn't stop him. The seas obeyed him. The water he walked on, like nothing was impossible. Jesus was the richest man that ever lived. And he didn't carry a wallet. He didn't need to. All the resources of the world were at his fingertips whenever he wanted to. So this is my point, is that which perspective are you looking at when it comes to being broke? Like, like the wealth that Jesus had was on the inside of him. The wealth that we have is on the inside of us. Like money is an idea. I can think of an idea and I can put the deal together and make as much money as I want. So is my money limited by because somebody else has it, or is it limited by my idea? It's only limited by my idea. So serial entrepreneurs know this. Like a serial entrepreneur is somebody who has many businesses, and they're not all necessarily all the same one. In fact, usually they're completely quite different. Look at Elon Musk. He's got like 4 different businesses that do completely different things from the other, and he's still thinking of other ones to bring to life. But a serial entrepreneur loves the idea and the journey of taking this cookie and going, I wonder if we can turn it into a chain around the world, and then go, oh, this is a cool chip. Maybe if we can, use this and put it in every jet plane and it makes them all invisible. Like they are taking their ideas and bringing them from the drawing board of their mind and bringing them to life. That's rich.
Yeah,
right? That's the richness. And so money is really just an idea. It's only limited by your imagination. And if you are partnered with God, you realize that like all the wealth that I have need of is right here. And God is not out of ideas. And God created creators. When we are creating is when we feel the closest to feeling what it's like to be God. Because we're like, I made that. Like that was my idea. I brought it to life. It makes you feel just a very tiny glimpse of what God probably feels when he's made beautiful things. He created us in his image. So the greatest creator, has created creators. And so we are like him. That's why we like creating. The only time we become poverty stricken is when we stop creating. Right. So I never worry about running out of money. I stopped that a long time ago because any idea that I have that I'm excited about, I know I can bring it to life. Especially if it's God breathed. Now, not all things pan out. I've been involved in many business deals that did not work out. But as I've aged, becoming older and more familiar with things, I realized that making that, those additional millions are not even close as how difficult it was to make the first one. But if you can do it once, can you do it twice? And if you can do it twice, can you do it again and again and again? And so the fear of it and the holding on of the possibilities of losing it, start losing its power over and over again. You realize, like, as long as I have an imagination and a good work ethic, if I can learn, I can earn. If I can create, I can make as much money as I want. And it's only limited by my ideas. As long as I can think, I can make as much money as I want. Well, how much do I want? Well, it's not about how much I want. It's about how much can I give? How can I give more? Like, I've never been this person, but man, if I could ever get to a point where I give away 90%, I couldn't even spend the 10 that would remain. God would bless me so much, I couldn't even ever spend the last 10%. He's only asking for 10. If you could give 90, you'd be the wealthiest man in the world, because he would make sure you had more than any man who probably, of our dispensation. Because he created that biblical economic. And when you look at the Tony Robbins of the world that aren't even believers, they're not even Christians, they believe in all kinds of weird stuff. He won't even mentor you unless you give 10% away to charity. How does he know that? He's like, he can't explain how it works, but he just knows that it works. And there's a lot of mentors that do that. They believe in all kinds of crazy stuff, but then they don't know how it works, but they just know that it works. And so how much more for the kingdom entrepreneur? The less we keep, the more prosperous we are. The more we give away, right? So we are to generate income, to multiply income, to manage that income, and to protect that income.
It's interesting in the beginning of the
Generate,
Bible.
multiply, manage, protect.
I love that. That's like the buckets too. It's funny because the first thing I learned that they told us about God was, in the beginning, God what? Created the heavens and the earth. And so like made us in our own image, which is interesting because it's like we are creators. And that's when I feel the most stagnant, is when I stop creating something, right? And usually you stop creating based off of fear, right? Let's not do this. Let's not take this risk. Let's not create this thing. And that's the opposite of the abundance mindset of just like fear, and breaking everything down. So that's so well put. I never actually heard it that way, because it is a whole different, you see how like
giving conquers fear.
Yeah.
So it takes care of itself. Like people that have fear won't even give 5%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So if you do it over and over again, the fear, it's built within the fabric. Entwined within the fabric of what God is teaching you. It literally takes away the fear to where you realize that it doesn't matter what I have or I don't have in my bank account. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how much am I giving, because what I give is what brings in the harvest. It's like Miles Monroe was a mentor of mine, and he writes in his books that, he'd give you a seed, an apple seed, and put it in your hand. And he's like, what is in your hand? You're like, that's an apple seed. And he goes, no, you have an entire orchard in your hand. See, that's your perception. You still think that this is just one seed. I'm telling you have an orchard, because if you plant that in the ground, it will take root. It'll grow a tree, and that tree will bear fruit, and that fruit will have hundreds of thousands of seeds, and those seeds will go into the ground, and now you'll have hundreds of thousands of trees that will have hundreds of thousands of seeds. You have all coming from that one seed. That's the multiplier. And it's amazing what giving 10% or more to the kingdom of heaven, how it will multiply. And he's the multiplier. You're not the multiplier. He's the multiplier. And so the fear starts with you not sowing the 10%. That's where the fear starts. Once you're used to doing it, you realize you fear nothing. And I've found that, and I wrote it in the book, is that most people that don't give are not just stingy with their giving. They're stingy in their giving in all the areas of their life. They have a scarcity mentality in whether they give you advice or how they teach you, because they're afraid that you become better than them, or they won't give you the compliments you deserve because they're afraid it makes them look inferior. Like their scarcity bleeds into every area of their life, and how they operate in their relationships, in their marriage, and their business deals, and how they teach, the courses that they come up with, the type of company, the type of product. Well, I don't want to say too much. I'm afraid to lose the formula. They have all of this scarcity. They're not just protective and fearful of one area. How you do one thing is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. But the opposite is very true as well, is that if you are used to giving and you have abundance living on the inside of you, you find that you're abundant in everything. You're free to give compliments. You're abundant in receiving compliments. You're abundant in the way you give away money, and it doesn't have a hold on you. You're giving in your relationship. You're giving of your time, like you're giving of your thoughts, like you are abundant in everything. And it's the exact reverse of scarcity. You're not holding anything. You're not protecting anything. There's an abundance of everything. What are we fighting about?
So good. I want to do a little conclusion of all this stuff. And you are starting to put out some YouTube videos I found out today. You're going to be working on a YouTube channel, which I am completely stoked about, because now we get to have this wisdom. This is probably going to be like a 2 or 3 part series. I think we'll mix up because we want people to actually get it. And it's going to be a lot of shorts. Let's talk about Overcome Nation a little bit and just what you've actually done with that. If that is still, a big focus of what you're doing right now, want to talk about the YouTube and, what people can be expecting, because when they start to see this, they're going to want a lot more of you. And I don't want, you're not going to be able to get in the gate, by the way, so people can't come to his door and knock on the door. But how can more people find more about you? What are you working on? And, how can you get some value?
The biggest thing in my career right now is a cellular health company that I'm launching. It's called STELOMARE. And it supports all of the major pathways in the body that God created you to have. Most of the products that are out there are just a certain ingredient that fills a gap in your diet, or one pathway in the body. My products are all about cell signaling, getting your cells to communicate with each other. All 37 trillion cells that a man has in their body. It's like 31 trillion in a woman's body. It's all based on body size. But you have these pathways that for mitochondria, remember you and I had talked about that. You have antioxidant pathways. These are master switches, AMPK, master switch of your metabolism. You have neuro pathways. You have all these amazing pathways that God created that operate in your body, because your body is so complex. God created a phenomenal body that is, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, you're constantly breathing regardless of thinking about it. Your body is fighting off things whether you're thinking about it or not. If you have damage, your stem cells are going into the damaged areas and becoming brain cells or pancreas cells or liver cells. Your body is so intellectual, and you have all of these things that are firing, watching the synapses when you can actually see how you learn and what it looks like. Like God created it all, and he created it perfectly. And none of the companies out there are focusing on these pathways. And I found, being in the wellness industry for 20 years, I've made friends with formulators that put together some amazing products. And there's only a handful of them that really understand cell signaling, the cascade that's happening in your body with your cells communicating with each other and strengthening the pathways that degrade over time, especially for an athlete, because you're overwhelming your system with free radicals as you put your body under extreme pressures and intensity. And so your antioxidant system gets overwhelmed. And so this is why people give my product to racehorses even, because the recovery is so important. Anyway, I have 3 amazing products, and my newest one is for the brain. And so I've been working on that for 2 years, just getting ready to launch it. But I've attached it also to a mentorship program. And it started out with seeing that there are these phenomenal plants that grow around the world in the harshest environments of the world, in the Himalayas, in northern China, in Tibet, in areas of desert and dry heat, like the harshest areas of the world. There are plants that thrive in what you would think nothing would live. And they develop this self-defense chemistry within them. And when you consume them, they do phenomenal things. And so I started to do research on all these plants as I began to put them into my formulas. And I started to realize that these plants are stronger than the others because of they're constantly exposed to the harshest environments. And it's a beautiful parallel of what we have to go through in life. We become stronger through harsh environments. So one of the taglines I was using for these plant videos I was putting together is, They are built to thrive in harsh environments. And I thought, man, that's a leadership program. And so I thought, I am going to not only sell my products traditionally, but I'm also going to sell it in a way to where I can help people get wealthy by selling my products too, turning it into an affiliate program as well. And then I'm going to attach leadership to it through godly kingdom principles. And that leadership program is built to thrive in harsh environments. And so the one thing that is new for me is that because of the way I have built income and built these rivers of cash flow through the years and not showing much, I have never built anything online to where I show anything or other than like whatever my humble teachings that I have done in group pages, or like I have 1,500 hours of teaching and training in Vimeo that I've gathered through the years that are just sitting there doing nothing. And I think go back and visit them. I'm like, I don't even remember that, but some of that stuff is brilliant. I couldn't even remember that right now. I can't believe I said it, can't believe that, where you go in the ebbs and flows of life and God can give you pearls of wisdom. And I go back to that stuff. I'm like, Lord, man, I feel like dumb as a box of rocks now. Where was my head at back then? Like, that's awesome, And I was just sitting in a truck, giving some people some advice for an hour. Crazy. But anyway, so I've never built anything online that causes, I don't have a large following at all anywhere outside, but within my arena, my community in the direct selling space, I have hundreds of thousands of people that I've taught and trained. There, multiple 7-figure earners like that. But you wouldn't know it online. Right. But if you look up my name on Google, I'm pretty much everywhere. Yeah. So it's a weird oxymoron. So I need help in that area of like getting in front of a camera and starting to talk and trying to build a following. And Chanel's, going to help me with that. 'Cause she's, her ex-boyfriend who passed away was a very famous bodybuilder, and she did all of his stuff for him. So she's really good at that. But like, that's a new arena for me, bro. Like any help and support I can get from you or anyone to help me to be able to speak to a larger audience and impact more people and teach them kingdom principles and financial education and all the other things that come with overcoming, I need to turn that switch on, and I'm not good at it.
I'm really excited about you just releasing some more content out. And I don't think there needs to be any tips and tricks. It's the quality of what comes out of you is so pure, and it's so much, it expands and multiplies so much. So I'm excited. We're going to link all the different things in the description. That way people can find out the product. Is the mentorship live right now and good to go? Or
everything goes live the first week of April.
Okay. Amazing. What I would love to do is do another podcast with you and be able to go through more so. We didn't touch on a very important part, which I don't want to go backwards, but the part of you walking out of the storage unit, the part of you losing everything. So I kind of want to tempt my little audience here about a little cliffhanger, because I think the loss to then the rebuilding, when we launch your mentorship and we launch the new website and all that stuff, I think we could talk more about the product, because I'm interested to use the product as well. You sent me over, my wife has given me a joke about it, but you sent me a little bottle that I took when I started getting sick, and we talked about that. And I can just say I got better. I don't know if it's because of the pills or anything else, but it was like literally right after. So, I can be a case study. My wife was joking with me because she was like, "Oh, you got pills from Rick?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "What, are you going to grow some traps?" I was like, "Oh boy, can you imagine I'm just joking." But no, I'm really excited just to come alongside you in this whole thing and help any way that we know how, because, we got a pretty good audience. This podcast is new. We've got a lot of good guests going on, so this will take a life of its own. I'm excited just to share the mentorship. I was telling Jake, there's so many people online that have a huge following that don't have the depth and the value that you give. And I was always just hoping that you would give more, because I binge watched all the stuff that you had online, which was very surface level podcasts. They were great podcasts, but just very, video
Nothing in
chat
depth.
podcast, nothing
Yeah.
that was in depth about the story. So if you wouldn't mind, I would love to have you back on a
Sure,
podcast,
I'd love to.
run it again. Other than that, we love you guys. Thanks so much for taking a look and watching all this. This will be probably a 3-part series. I'll let Jake figure that whole thing out. Maybe 4-part series, but we got a lot more information. So if you guys do want to follow Rick, it is at Rick Gutman on Instagram. Do we know your YouTube channel yet? It will be
STELOMARE.
STELOMARE. Okay, we'll put everything in the description so you guys can find him. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.